There is an attempt at a right-wing coup going on in Venezuela right now. It has thrown the country deep into crisis. Juan Guaido has announced himself as the interim president on Wednesday, with no democratic mandate. This self-elected right-winger has received support which is flooding in from right-wingers across America and the world. US President Donald Trump says he will continue to use the full weight of the United States' economic and diplomatic power to press for the restoration of Venezuelan democracy. We encourage other Western Hemisphere governments to recognise the National Assembly President Guaido as the interim president of Venezuela. Trump's Vice President Mike Pence chimed in that Nicolas Maduro was a dictator with no legitimate claim to power. This is ironic coming from a man who regularly defends the reactionary monarchy in Saudi Arabia. Even the Democrats agree. Barack Obama declared Venezuela an unusual and extraordinary threat. Taking their cue from the racist US President Trump, Western leaders rallied behind the coup attempt. The Venezuelan rich, along with their US allies, want to stop the workers and the poor of Venezuela from benefiting from the country's wealth, in particular the country's oil. They want it for themselves. The US is now talking about banning imports of Venezuelan oil in order to accelerate the country's economic crisis. They want the country to starve to produce an opening for their allies on the right. With the fascist Bolsonaro in power in Brazil, the US wants to topple any left influence in a region it has always seen as its own playground. The economic crisis being fed by the Venezuelan elite and the US has led to hyperinflation and massive poverty. Ordinary Venezuelans, working class and poor people, are again the victims of the power plays of the rich. 9 out of 10 Venezuelans live in poverty. When Hugo Chavez came to office in 1998, he implemented some reforms that benefited poor people, but he backed down from challenging the rich directly. He left their wealth and control of huge swathes of the economy under the control of the rich. He left the right-wing media intact. It was too little socialism that emboldened the wealthy to push back. When oil prices were high, Chavez could buy social peace between the rich and the poor. He could fund social programs, but when oil prices fell, a clash became inevitable. The government had to choose: to continue the social supports for workers and the poor by using the country's great wealth, or to leave the rich alone and instead turn to attacking the working class and poor. Current President Nicolas Maduro has certainly opposed the right, but he has also attacked ordinary people. Working class people don't want the return of the right, but they are demoralised and have lost faith in Maduro. This demoralisation has made coups by the rich and intervention by the USA much easier. Another problem is that the ruling left are entrenched in the Venezuelan state machinery. Bureaucracy and corruption have further demoralised rank-and-file workers and the poor. Instead of challenging the state machinery, the Chavista movement has become integrated with it, further compromising themselves. The right are still afraid of the mass movement that saved Chavez from a previous coup, when 1 million people came out onto the streets. Maduro has responded to Trump's declaration by ordering all US diplomatic staff out of Venezuela within 24 hours. Guaido countermanded the order, and the US responded by saying it would not remove its diplomats, trying to create a diplomatic incident which they would use as an excuse for military intervention. Venezuela is often held up as an example of how socialism will never work. Leo Varadkar and all the EU leaders like to throw Venezuela in the face of progressives here. Firstly, whenever a people tries to enact change, the USA and other imperial powers try to destroy them politically, economically and militarily. They strangle, they embargo and they bomb. And then they say, look, it doesn't work. They are responsible for the chaos that they create. But what Venezuela does show is how compromises with the rich and the ruling class will lead to long-term disaster. Socialism has to come from a mass people power movement of working class people who challenge the old corrupt state machine, dismiss the police chiefs, the army generals and the top bureaucrats and civil servants, all unelected. They need to go and be replaced with a truly democratic system of mass assemblies of the people. When Chavez was faced with a coup, he was saved by mass popular mobilization. This is the way to beat back the right. But it will be much harder because Maduro will not take the lead of such resistance, and many workers have lost faith in him. The ghost of Chile 1973 hangs over Venezuela. Back then, a left-wing government led by Salvador Allende was overthrown by right-wing General Pinochet. Tens of thousands of working class and poor people were killed after the coup, which was backed by the USA. In Chile, the workers had occupied their factories and formed mass assemblies called cordones, which could have laid the basis of a new democracy. But Allende threatened the workers and said that they were as bad as the right. He put his faith in the very state machine that was about to eat him up, even inviting generals like Pinochet into his government to show his good faith. But the ruling class are ruthless and will stop at nothing to prevent working class people from creating a just and equal world. The workers in Chile had no radical political organisation of their own that had roots in every workplace and could connect all those who understood the need for revolution, all those who wanted to push back Pinochet, while also replacing the old corrupt state with their own new democracy. The French revolutionary Saint-Just once said, "Those who half make a revolution dig their own graves." Let's hope that Venezuelan workers can create their own leaders who can rise up against this coup, push aside those like Maduro, who would lead the working class down the path of corruption, compromise and ruin, and create a real socialist society where the wealth of Venezuela is shared amongst those who produce it.